Okay, I know the title sounds like I am spoiled, but hear me out. My brother Ethan, 20 years old, got a car for his 18th birthday, a 20-year-old Lexus. Not new, but in great shape. He flaunted it all through his senior year of high school. Compared to him, I get just as good grades, sometimes even better. I worked my hardest, hoping for some fairness. I even volunteered, cleaning up garbage in my local area. My 18th birthday came a few weeks ago, and the only thing I wanted was a car. Not a new or flashy one, just something reliable. But the party itself was nothing like Ethan's. For his 18th, Mom baked a delicious layered chocolate pudding cake. I got a store-bought sheet cake. He had a DJ. I had Dad's old boombox and some mixed CDs. As the party wrapped up, I hoped my parents would surprise me with a car, but it did not happen. I asked them why there was no car when Ethan got one, and they said they felt he had worked harder. I asked what he did that I didn't because I'd done all that and more. My grandma overheard and asked them the same. She lectured my parents, saying she was very disappointed in them for showing favoritism. She then announced to everyone still there how unfair they were being. My uncle was the first to say something, followed by everyone else. I walked away to my room to think. I received a few I'm sorry calls from relatives, and my grandparents took me out for the evening. But when I got back, my parents were furious, claiming I had shamed them. I ignored them, not wanting a fight. Weeks of silent treatment followed until a few days ago. Suddenly, my parents presented me with a white '98 Subaru Legacy in great condition. They threw the keys and the title in an envelope at me and told me to have fun. They are even covering insurance for the next 6 months, like they did for Ethan. I know a car is a privilege, not a right, so I feel like I blackmailed my parents into getting me one. Am I the antagonist for how all this played out? Edit. I need to clarify a few things. My parents make decent money and live moderately by choice. Their finances might be stretched by Ethan's college tuition, as he got a partial scholarship and they are paying the rest. I do not intend to ask for the same treatment. I plan to work and pay my own student loans. Now that I have the car, I am looking into getting a part-time job. This is not a gender issue as I am male like my brother. The bill of sale for my car shows my parents paid $1,600, whereas Ethan's car cost over $3,000. But it was not about the money. I actually love the Subaru and told my parents, but they did not share my enthusiasm. I tried discussing the car with my parents last year, but they dodged the topic. I stopped pushing, fearing I would sound like a brat. So I just stayed silent and hoped. I cannot stay with my grandparents because they live in a one-bedroom condo, having downsized for retirement. They know all the details and tell me I did not do anything wrong. They had planned to confront my parents quietly, but took the chance when they overheard our conversation. Ethan's 18th party was during the height of the pandemic in 2020. We should not have had a big party, but my parents insisted. Ethan barely speaks to me, even before college. He did not show up for my 18th, likely busy with college in another state. I have not seen or heard from him since Christmas, and even then, we only exchanged a mild greeting. I did enthusiastically thank my parents for the car, but they barely acknowledged me. When I thanked them, they brushed me off and went inside, giving off the vibe that they were letting a brat play with his new toy. It was pretty upsetting and one of the reasons I made this post. Edit 2. There is more. I was really hoping to get the car because I could not get a part-time job without one. We do not live in the city, and the nearest public bus stop is 10 miles away. I have always had to get rides to go anywhere. Now that I have the Subaru, I am looking for a part-time job as soon as I can. Edit 3. Since many people mentioned it, I want to clarify that when I talked to my parents after the party, it was not in front of the rest of the family. I intentionally spoke with them in another room, where I thought we were out of earshot. But my grandma eavesdropped and then barged in, starting the whole commotion. Update. Now I can tell you what happened before college starts. But first, a few responses to previous comments and messages. I needed a car because there was no other way for me to get a job, no personal transportation, and over 10 miles from the nearest bus stop. For those who told me to give the car back or accept life's unfairness, please stop. My inbox was flooded, and it took time to sort through it. Anyway, I did get a part-time job that went full-time for the summer after I graduated. But 3 weeks into working part-time, the Subaru blew its head gasket on the highway. The temp gauge redlined, and I had to pull over and call for help. My grandparents found that someone had run a lot of gasket sealer in it, and it was still in the coolant. The car was barely hanging on by a thread. My parents claimed no prior knowledge and just shrugged, saying it was karma for making them get me the car. My grandparents witnessed this and tore into my parents. My grandma told me to wait in my room while they sorted it out. 2 hours later, I was called back into the living room. My parents looked devastated. My uncle and 2 other relatives were there too. My grandparents got it out of them that they bought the cheapest running car they could find without inspecting it. My uncle said the engine would need rebuilding, costing more than the car was worth. I had to call work and go on unpaid leave. I had no involvement in what happened next. My grandparents and parents took care of it. A few days later, they came back with a 1999 Honda Civic hatchback with 180,000 miles. It was white like the Subaru and drives great, with new repairs like a radiator. My uncle gave it the okay. I profusely thanked everyone. My parents, though, seemed utterly defeated. They said little and walked away, not even acting like they were giving a new toy to a brat. If I could put it to words, it was pure defeat. The Subaru was resold for $400, and that money went into my savings. That is only half the story. You see, when I said I did better in school than my brother, I was not kidding. My brother got a 30% scholarship after he finished high school. I got a 50% scholarship, not at the same college, but at one comparably good and closer. To say my parents were shocked is an understatement, but as soon as their shock wore off, they just looked unhappy. I decided not to poke the bear by asking them about it, but my grandma thought otherwise. And when she poked, she really poked. First, she asked my parents if they were happy for me. They claimed they were, but it did not show in their attitudes. My grandparents then bluntly asked what their problem was. Why could they not be happy for their second son doing well? My mother looked really upset, and my father could not meet my eyes. They both meekly said they were happy for me and wanted me to take the world by storm when I go to college. They even promised to help pay some of my tuition, just like they do for my brother. My grandparents sharply reminded them that there should never have been any favoritism, period. I thanked my parents for their help, receiving a limp handshake from my father and a stiff hug from my mother. It all felt so forced. I was and still am extremely thankful for the car and the tuition, but my parents just drained the room of all emotion. I ended up asking my grandparents if they knew why my parents acted this way. Was I an accidental pregnancy or something? They gave me the "it is time we told you" look. Well, I am not adopted like so many guessed, but I was unplanned. Sort of. My parents wanted both a girl and a boy but got 2 boys instead. My brother was the first boy, so they hoped the second child would be a girl and stopped after 2 kids. They refused to find out my gender until after I was born, convinced I would be a girl. They bought a lot of baby stuff for a girl. When I was not a girl, I ended up using my brother's hand-me-downs until I was 3 because my parents had bought so much girl stuff in advance that they couldn't use. So I was a disappointment from birth. My grandparents admitted that my parents are messed up and have been that way so long there is no point in expecting them to change. Since then, my parents have not spoken much about college. They avoid the subject as much as they can. Thanks to some warnings from people who messaged me, making me paranoid, I called the college I was accepted to and told them that if anyone calls or emails pretending to be me, or if my parents call trying to say I am not coming, to call me for a double or even triple check. I do not really think my parents would do that, especially after everything that has happened, but better safe than sorry. Surprisingly, my brother called me out of the blue. He said our grandparents told him everything. In his own way, he apologized for what happened and hoped that once I am on my own, I will never need to come back. He admitted that when he finishes college, he plans to stay in the state he is in because he likes it there. Our parents want him to return after getting his degree, but it does not look like that is going to happen. I said I did not blame him and might do the same. The conversation was a bit awkward because we are not used to speaking to each other much anymore. Over the weekend, my grandparents and the rest of the family held a surprise party for me. It was almost a repeat of my brother's 18th birthday, with a DJ and a big chocolate cake my grandma made. I could not thank them enough. My parents attended, but they were like wallflowers the entire time, sitting at a far table in the corner, drinking beer quietly. They had an even greater look of defeat. I think the party was not just to congratulate me but also to rub in my parents' faces that they should have done better. The rest of the family had made their disappointment clear. My parents looked like they wanted to leave the party early, but my grandma said you are never too old to be taught a lesson in humility. When my part-time job turned into a full-time role after high school, it felt like a step toward building my savings before heading off to college. Sure, the pay was minimum wage, but a job is a job. I aimed to leave on a high note, doing my best until my 2 weeks notice was up. Update 2. 2 years have passed, and though I expected to post one last time in 2024, given my brother's 4-year degree trajectory, here I am. I still own the Honda, and it runs perfectly. I have diligently kept up with oil changes and maintenance. No accidents. I pride myself on being a careful driver. The final blow to my parents came when they learned I had secured a better scholarship than my brother. All their justifications for favoring him collapsed. They begrudgingly offered words of encouragement, but I could tell they were insincere. The truth behind their disdain for me, which I later learned from my grandma, was shocking. My parents had wanted their second child to be a girl. After I left for college, my grandma revealed even more. Before I was born, my parents were so convinced I would be a girl that they bought a multitude of girl-related items, without bothering to verify my gender through an ultrasound. Shockingly, my mother tried to raise me as a girl for the first 6 months of my life. She dressed me in girls' clothes and called me by a different name. My father enabled this. Grandma proved it by showing me old family photos of infant me in pink clothes, with visible name tags bearing the girl's name my parents had picked out. When word got out, my parents stopped dressing me as a girl. My grandparents told my mother that raising me as something I was not was unfair and denied me any real choice. Remarkably, though my family holds old-fashioned views, my grandparents are surprisingly open-minded and put an end to the girl treatment. Yet, rather than buying new clothes, my parents relegated me to my brother's hand-me-downs for years until my grandparents intervened again. Discovering this, I realized my grandparents shielded me from a much worse childhood and kept this truth from me, until recently. I am incredibly grateful to them. My mother allegedly struggled to address me by my real name for over 2 years. Because they had not gotten the daughter they desired, my parents never bonded with me as they did with my brother. When my grandparents discovered I was not receiving new items like my brother, they threatened to seek guardianship of me, supported by evidence of my parents' neglect. Afraid of a public scandal, my parents gave in and pretended to love me for a while. However, as I grew older, this feigned affection deteriorated into indifference and perhaps even hate. I am unsure if it was hate. Hate still implies caring in some form. Indifference, being the true opposite of love, seems more accurate. Once I moved out, they disconnected from the family, throwing themselves into work. Partly because they were forced by the family to contribute to my college expenses just as they did for my brother, but also because work provided them with an excuse to avoid everyone. My grandma suspects they have even resorted to sleeping in their cars to avoid going home. I have only seen my parents at Christmas, at my uncle's house, over the past couple of years. They barely speak to me, as if they have stopped considering me their son. They seem unable to cope with the family's rejection and the self-inflicted humiliation. My grandmother informed me that my childhood bedroom remains untouched since the day I moved out, while my brother's room is maintained, ready for his return after college. However, that reunion did not occur. My parents flew out to his graduation and celebrated lavishly with him. I was not invited, not that I could afford to go, but my grandparents attended and later filled me in on all the details. My parents were confident my brother would return home, but that illusion shattered when he awkwardly revealed he had secured a job and found his own apartment through an internship he had completed the previous year. My father was livid, and my mother broke down, crying and begging him to come back. Yet he refused. Over the past 2 years, my brother and I have reconnected. He stumbled upon my Reddit posts and reached out. There was no anger, just a desire to talk. He confided in me that our parents had put him through a lot too. Our mother had smothered him, especially in my absence, and our father was strict with his expectations. Knowing that I outperformed my brother despite their total investment in him broke them, and now, they are even more shattered because he refused to come home. This treatment is also why my brother and I lost touch for so long. He did oppress me growing up, but the favoritism went to his head. However, it came with strings attached. Once he realized that, he sought counseling after moving out. He also found a girlfriend in college and kept her a secret, knowing our parents would not approve. When they found out, my mother referred to his girlfriend pejoratively without even meeting her. This angered my brother, and he defended her fiercely. His girlfriend, who's in nursing school and close to graduating, sounds wonderful based on his description, though I have not met her. Grandma informed me that my mother even hired a private investigator to dig into the girlfriend's background, only to find she was clean and came from a good family with similar values. Still, my mother blamed her for my brother's decision not to return home, though he had made that decision independently. When my mother confessed to hiring a detective, my brother confronted them, pointing out how their extreme favoritism amounted to abuse, as it nearly turned him into them. This realization deeply affected my parents. My brother informed our grandparents, prompting yet another family intervention, which I joined via video call. My parents scarcely acknowledged me until my brother insisted they engage. The intervention's message was clear. They needed to treat both sons fairly. Pent-up frustrations boiled over, and my father erupted, admitting they had messed up but questioned what more could be done. He barked about contributing to my college expenses and what more I wanted. The intervention ended on a sour note. My mother offered a half-hearted apology to me and quickly shifted focus to my brother. It was not until he urged her to genuinely apologize to me that my father snatched the phone and ended the call, demanding everyone leave. My grandparents expressed their deep disappointment, suggesting that losing both sons should make them reconsider their biased ways. Currently, my parents are not on speaking terms with the rest of the family. There is a rumor they might move, but with a paid-off country house and thriving careers, it seems unwise. Given that neither my brother nor I plan to return, it might not matter. I doubt they would welcome me after all that transpired. Despite their parenting failures, I am thankful for their financial help with my college expenses, which significantly reduced my student loans. But as parents, it is evident they did not do a good job.